Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and it's finally here. We have a campaign map flyover for Warhammer 3, which will be taking us over some parts of Kislev, the Mountains of Morn and Grand Imperial Cafe. So before anything, if you haven't seen the original video by Creative Assembly, this is without me stopping and analyzing everything. There's a timestamp in the description which will allow you to skip through that if you want to just check that before the analysis. But other than that, there's a lot to discuss because, well, you know, it's the Warhammer 3 map, so yeah. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in.
Beyond Reichland, Ostermark, and the reach of the Empire stands a frozen bulwark. Kislev, a fractured kingdom besieged from within and without by enemies of ideology and chaos.
Alright, we're stopping already as we're already at an important part of the map. Remember, this is the campaign map, this is where you'll be playing, and we can already see, well, Kislev city, and it's looking gorgeous. Keep in mind, obviously, this is just the icon. It's not the city that we'll be fighting in, though hopefully we will get a massive city to fight in that looks like that because, you know, it's Kislev city. It's one of the most important cities in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. We've only just had a little bit of a flyover so far, but everything is looking quite stylized. Kislev looks kind of dark and gritty. The lighting itself for the campaign map looks better. I'm not sure if this is the final result that we'll get. I really hope it is because it's not so bright. It just looks more, you know, darker tones, especially for Warhammer Fantasy, which is a dark, medieval, low fantasy type of setting. This is pretty good. I'm really happy about this. This is looking great.
Tsarina Katerin, daughter of Tsar Boris the Beloved, rules from the peaks of the Boka Palace in the city of Kislev. The Ice Queen must lean heavily on her ice court if she means to bring order and security to these turbulent lands.
Okay, so stopping and going back a little bit, so she's ruling from the city of Kislev. Again, this is expected because, you know, Tsarina, but does this mean that she's going to start there? I don't think that we've had Tsarina's start position just yet. It obviously makes sense for her to be there, and if that's the case, she's going to be close to the Empire. She's going to have a lot of territory to play with. Not a lot of fighting at the beginning, I imagine, but hey, that's still going to work out quite well for Confederation and so on, depending obviously on how aggressive the Chaos factions actually are. Still, a start at Kislev is incredibly lore-friendly, of course, and it's pretty much where we all wanted Katerin to start anyway, so, well, some people might think otherwise, but I'm quite happy with this, and let's just keep on moving.
But there are those who do not approve of Katerin's reign and would sooner see themselves in power. It's from Castle Alexandrinov, stronghold of the Great Orthodoxy and seat of Supreme Patriarch Kostaltin, that the Tsarina faces the most immediate threat to her rule.
Alright, so I had to get into the lore for this, and it seems that Castle Alexandrinov, if it still remains the same as obviously lore can change, is based in the north of Erengrad. It borders Troll Country, so I'm assuming that Erengrad itself will be his proper start position and then move on from there, with the castle maybe acting as some sort of fort or minor settlement, because it looks like Erengrad is where he starts. I mean, that's the port itself, and the castle is on the mountain. Either way, that's pretty cool. Hopefully we'll get some confirmation regarding this or not, as I do know that later on a character shows up which isn't really starting there, they've just got him there for effect. So we're not too sure if this is even the case for these characters, though it does make some sense.
These two Kislevite figureheads vie for the people's devotion, so they might employ powerful boons from their pantheon of gods.
We'll talk about the Bloodthirster in just a bit. First, I want to talk about Help It. See, this hasn't been confirmed or anything, but it's a personal hope of mine for Warhammer 3. We've got places like Help It and so on, and some other places. I believe we might even have Sylvania. It really depends on how the campaign map actually looks when we get the full thing shown off. I would love to see if like legendary characters from those locations could also be playable in this campaign map and not just the Mega Mortal Empires, Immortal Empires map. So say for example, if you own a Twisted and Twilight, you should be able to play as Fraught here too, because hey, it could be kind of fun, which would mean that you'll have access to a lot more things. It wouldn't obviously be at launch, because obviously that would make no sense, but a little bit down the line, I mean, some people will probably mod that in anyway. I just hope that they appear, you know, because it would be kind of cool, and that way you don't have to do a big campaign map, you could just do a small one just for fun. Again, this is just speculation here, but I think a lot of people would really enjoy that, especially some people with not so powerful computers. Or maybe that's just me, but I kind of like the small maps. I just wish there were more to play around with. It obviously didn't make sense for the Eye of the Vortex, as, well, pretty much nothing was there, from Game 1 at least. So here, it does kind of work.
Further north, between the northern and eastern oblasts, stands the Cursed City. Prague is the bastion of the north, a title earned through blood, corruption, and endless siege. A dying, tainted beast thrashing against the inevitability of its fate.
So the Bloodthirster attacks Prague, surprise surprise. I'll be very honest with you, despite the fact that obviously we're getting Kislev City and so on, I'm really hoping that Prague gets like a unique map and so on. Like we already seen like from the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay setting and so on, it's supposed to be a really, really big map, but Prague has so much historic lore. Granted, it's mostly getting destroyed over and over. I just really hope that it has a unique map, and hopefully a stop position in the future would be kind of cool. We don't know how big Kislev is at the moment. I still think that we're going to have a lot of Kislev moving into the eastern portions of the map, as obviously we've seen some changes in Kislev in the old world from the maps given by Games Workshop, so it's likely going to affect Warhammer 3 too. Right, so we know that they're going to start moving into another section now, but we do get a little bit of the map here, and this is pretty cool, because we've got Black Blood Pass. I'm assuming that that's kind of fusing Hell Pit with a few settlements in the Norse Dwarf regions. And obviously we've got Dukles, I want to say, Forest. So yeah, these are new. These are completely new. I wonder what this means. Obviously they're going to be spreading a few different locations out. They're trying to make Kislev have a few more minor factions, which kind of makes sense. Because, well, let's be honest, Kislev is a small country. If they're able to squeeze in a few more, like, minor settlements and so on, that would be good, because at least it'll give you some sort of variety. Obviously that's kind of important, especially considering, what, it only had 4 regions in the Mortal Empires? We'll have to wait and see, but this is in fact quite exciting. Oh my god, Chaos Dwarf lands and we still don't have Chaos Dwarfs. It hurts. It hurts to see that. I know like they'll likely be the first DLC, because I think both Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 had a race pack as the first DLC, but like, you can see it there, you know, and it's just so, like, I like the ogres, don't get me wrong. I love the idea of ogres being pre-order incentive, especially because they're right in the smack in the middle of everything. But, like, I'm a big Chaos Dwarf fan. I'm a really big Chaos Dwarf fan. So, just seeing that there is like, oh god, so close yet so far away.
In the east, far from Kislev's frosty plains, loom the deadly mountains of Morn. Here, ogres and other merciless beasts make their home, though none more awe-inspiring than the deified Firemouth volcano, from which magic-wielding ogres known as Firebellies draw their considerable power.
Okay, so we're in the Mountains of Morn, and I'll be very honest with you, my headcanon made it think it was going to look a bit more inhospitable. It does make sense, because obviously they need armies to move around and so on, but yeah, I was expecting, I don't know, more rough terrain. Now, that being said, Firemouth looks really interesting. I don't think we've ever had proper representation of art on how it looks, and yeah, it looks really, really cool. I'm really excited to see more from this, because Ogre Lore wasn't really the most fleshed out, as they were technically one of the newest races in the setting, and then obviously the world blowing up and so on, so it's great to see it so fleshed out now.
winding ivory road, the Great Hall of Greasus can be smelt before seen. Inside, Greasus Goldtooth the Over-Tyrant counts his riches and gorges on the spoils of his bountiful greed, all the while accepting mercenary contracts from anyone with deep enough pockets.
Alright, so we get to see Greasus' start position, which really doesn't show us too much, I'll be very honest about that, yet it's not too bad. There's pretty much just two ways to him, it's not an open area, so, well, it's defendable at the very least. You know what I really want? Just a proper version of the map that we can just zoom into and so on. That would be kind of cool, just so we can, like, analyze a bit better, but hey, I guess they want to just show this off before they go to Christmas break. Which I'm not complaining about. So far we've seen pretty cool stuff, like the Kislev stuff is just absolutely awesome. So yeah, let's carry on.
Further east, straddling the border between the Mountains of Morn and Grand Cathay, is the narrow Worm Pass. Though far from home, Scrag the Slaughterer and his insane rabble have pilgrimaged from the west to pay tribute to the Great Maw, their violent god. Scrag drags behind him a mountain of bloody offerings to feed the beast in exchange for sinister rewards.
Okay, before we carry on, this is what I was mentioning earlier on in the video. Scrag does not start here. We already know that he starts, well, in the very western portion of the map, essentially, but it's good to see that they're using him as a plot point. The map is looking good, and you can see that this area borders Grand Cathay as we're starting to see the floating rocks and so on, which I think is a really nice touch. They're looking like they're really hammering in the differences between different climates and making it look nice, especially as it blends. Okay, so we can see the map once again, and we can see a few provinces such as Ice Path, the Ivory Road, the Mountains of Morn. We can also see in the upper right hand side that the Great Maw will in fact feature in the campaign map, which is absolutely awesome, as some people were worried that, well, yeah, they didn't really show it off a lot, so a lot of people were kind of concerned, but hey, it's there. Ancient Giant Lands are there too, Path to the East. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be quite interesting because it's a lot of mountainous terrain. I mean, we can see this here. And it's going to be quite difficult to navigate. I mean, it's going to be easy if you're, say, for example, you're a dwarf, a beastman, a wood elf, or a skaven. But pretty much anyone else, yeah, this is going to be kind of tough to move around. Alright, I must admit that now that we can see Cathay, it does look a little larger than I expected. We can see the Great Bastion, the Imperial Road. A lot of territories which were mentioned in lore are there. Obviously, we're not getting everything of Grand Cathay. It is a little small, but it's not like they're adding in the whole country. Hopefully they will in the mega map or through map expansions, as yeah, we've always been told that Grand Cathay is the largest human empire. It's the largest nation, civilized nation, and so on. So I want it to be a bit bigger. It's still not a complaint because it still looks big enough. That looks like it's going to be a decent amount of regions too. Nangao, the Great Bastion, yeah. I mean, it's not too bad. In all honesty, I thought headcanon-wise that the Warpstone Desert would be a little bit more northern. It's a bit strange to me, but then again, we've never really had proper representation map-wise of this, so this is the first time that I'm seeing it and I'm like, oh, okay, this means this then.
Bordering these terrible mountains are the isolated lands of Grand Cathay. Past the Warpstone Desert in the heart of the wastelands of Jinshin, Zhao Ming defends Hanyu Port from brazen ogres and burrowing Skaven. It is the duty of the dragon siblings to maintain the harmony between yin and yang. Doing so will ensure Grand Cathay's strength and prosperity.
Okay, so we're getting our first look at Grand Cathay, and it's looking nice. It's very stylized, it's, well, pretty much what I was expecting headcanon-wise, which for any Warhammer fan, you know, that's always a nice thing when that happens, so far, so good.
On the most eastern edge of Grand Cathay is the capital city of the Celestial Loyalists, Wei Jin, above which hangs the Celestial City, home of the Dragon Emperor. With the turn of the Wu Jing compass, the Dragon Emperor's children can carve out Cathay's fate, economic powerhouse or machine of war.
Right, so I must admit, this caught me by surprise. I did not expect Wei Jin to be, well, so close to the border to Chaos. I expected it to be more, centralized. Does that make sense? Obviously, we do know that the Warhammer 3 map has been distorted a little bit because beyond this wall should be the lands of the Kurgans and so on, but we're seeing very corrupted territories, obviously with some Tzeentchian influences. But I didn't expect it to be so close to all the chaotic stuff, especially because the compass is so important and so on. It's really curious. I wonder how this is going to work in game. Like, this is something that actually caught me off by, like, massive surprise.
The compass decides. The Great Bastion snakes and weaves across miles of country, physically separating Grand Cathay from the chaos wastes beyond. For centuries has this wall stood firm, repelling legions upon legions of twisted demons and foul chaos worshippers. The Cathayans must remain vigilant, for the threat of invasion is ever growing.
Right, so from what I gather, and this is just speculation, I'll have to ask a developer and hopefully they'll be willing to answer. There are a few different points into Grand Cathay through the Bastion. Not only is there the gates, but there seems to be holes in the wall. I don't know if we can traverse them. If we can, that would be pretty good, obviously, because then you won't have to siege through and so on. It won't be like when you're trying to get into Inner Ulf 1, where it's kind of annoying having to go through the walls all the time, through the forts. Though there is some sort of magical glow there, so maybe it's patched up with magic? I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. Either way, it's looking quite defensive. You can tell the stark contrast between Grand Cathay and then anything forward from it, because obviously you've got the Great Bastion there holding it. It's really interesting. It's honestly really cool. I like the style. It's one of these things where, you know, obviously being in the hobby for so long, you kind of have like this expectation on how things look. And yeah, it's kind of fitting with that.
Past the lands of stone and steel is Gunpowder Road, home of Nangao and Miaoying. From here, the Storm Dragon rules the northern provinces and garrisons the Great Bastion. To fund such a task, she dispatches caravans along the Ivory Road, trading with distant lands beyond the mountains. Hers is the task of unending stewardship, for if the Bastion falls, it's the people who suffer.
So, her territory is what leads to the Ivory Road. That makes sense. I kind of expected Nangao to be on the Bastion itself, but hey, this is a different surprise. I wonder how that's going to work. We're going to obviously have to wait until gameplay gets released and so on, but still, this is quite interesting. So far, everything that's been shown off is kind of exciting. I'm honestly looking forward to this. Everything's been a bit unexpected. I don't know, I had similar thoughts for some things, but very drastically different for others. Yet, everything looks good. I'm excited. I wonder what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion, because obviously we've seen a lot. It's a bit of a shame, however, that we didn't get to see the chaos parts of the north, of course, the realms itself and so on. I wonder if they're just saving that for a video in the future, possibly at the start of the year or something. We're going to have to wait and see. I'm just really, really curious about that, because we've had a good look now of Kislev, of the Ogre Kingdoms, of Grand Cathay, and Chaos is like, we need to wait, we need to see. But like, I'm really, really curious, because obviously I wasn't really expecting monogods, so to see monogods and now like we're not really getting to see anything, it's like, come on. But either way, I'm actually really hyped. I'm sorry if I sound a bit weird. I've been dealing with a chest infection. It's just not great. But I'm going to have the original playing after this, so you guys can check it out if you want to use the timestamps from before. I mentioned it earlier in the video. And I hopefully will see you again very, very soon. Have a good day.
Beyond Reichland, Ostermark, and the reach of the Empire stands a frozen bulwark. Kislev, a fractured kingdom besieged from within and without by enemies of ideology and chaos. Tsarina Katerin, daughter of Tsar Boris the Beloved, rules from the peaks of the Boka Palace in the city of Kislev. The Ice Queen must lean heavily on her ice court if she means to bring order and security to these turbulent lands. But there are those who do not approve of Katerin's reign and would sooner see themselves in power. It's from Castle Alexandrinov, stronghold of the Great Orthodoxy and seat of Supreme Patriarch Kostaltin, that the Tsarina faces the most immediate threat to her rule. These two Kislevite figureheads vie for the people's devotion, so they might employ powerful boons from their pantheon of gods. Further north, between the northern and eastern oblasts, stands the Cursed City. Prague is the bastion of the north, a title earned through blood, corruption, and endless siege. A dying, tainted beast thrashing against the inevitability of its fate. In the east, far from Kislev's frosty plains, loom the deadly mountains of Morn. Here, ogres and other merciless beasts make their home, though none more awe-inspiring than the deified Firemouth volcano, from which magic-wielding ogres known as Firebellies draw their considerable power. Winding ivory road, the Great Hall of Greasus can be smelt before seen. Inside, Greasus Goldtooth the Over-Tyrant counts his riches and gorges on the spoils of his bountiful greed, all the while accepting mercenary contracts from anyone with deep enough pockets. Further east, straddling the border between the mountains of Morn and Grand Cathay, is the narrow Worm Pass. Though far from home, Scrag the Slaughterer and his insane rabble have pilgrimaged from the west to pay tribute to the Great Maw, their violent god. Scrag drags behind him a mountain of bloody offerings to feed the beast in exchange for sinister rewards. Bordering these terrible mountains are the isolated lands of Grand Cathay. Past the Warpstone Desert in the heart of the wastelands of Jinshin, Zhao Ming defends Hanyu Port from brazen ogres and burrowing Skaven. It is the duty of the dragon siblings to maintain the harmony between yin and yang. Doing so will ensure Grand Cathay's strength and prosperity. On the most eastern edge of Grand Cathay is the capital city of the Celestial Loyalists, Weijin, above which hangs the Celestial City, home of the Dragon Emperor. With the turn of the Wujing compass, the Dragon Emperor's children can carve out Cathay's fate, economic powerhouse or machine of war. The compass decides. The Great Bastion snakes and weaves across miles of country, physically separating Grand Cathay from the chaos wastes beyond. For centuries has this wall stood firm, repelling legions upon legions of twisted demons and foul chaos worshippers. The Cathayans must remain vigilant, for the threat of invasion is ever growing. Past the lands of stone and steel is Gunpowder Road, home of Nangao and Miaoying. From here, the Storm Dragon rules the northern provinces and garrisons the Great Bastion. To fund such a task, she dispatches caravans along the Ivory Road, trading with distant lands beyond the mountains. Hers is the task of unending stewardship, for if the Bastion falls, it's the people who suffer.
But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.